Imagine standing at the edge of a vast desert. The sun scorches down, the horizon bends in a haze, and every step you take sinks into the shifting sands. Around you, there are no guides, no visible destination, only the merciless truth that the next step could either save you or destroy you. For most, such a place would symbolize death or futility. But for a rare few, those marked by something unseen, it is not merely a desert. It is an initiation. Life, for many, is a path of modest comforts and predictable trials. Moments of sorrow softened by moments of joy, challenges often balanced by visible rewards. Yet, for those whom destiny carves out differently, for those chosen to bear spiritual weight far beyond the ordinary, the trials come not as balanced equations, but as unsolvable paradoxes. These are the souls thrust into crucibles so intense that survival itself becomes a question. And still, they endure, not because they are stronger in the worldly sense, but because their suffering is woven with purpose, even when invisible to them. This paradox, that the most tested are often those chosen for a higher calling, confronts us with a disturbing question. Why must transcendence demand agony? If the universe is just, why are its deepest initiations laced with pain so profound it borders on annihilation? The first and perhaps most piercing of these tests is the trial of isolation. Not merely the loneliness of an empty room, but the kind of isolation where every voice that once affirmed your worth grows silent. The chosen soul often feels abandoned not just by people, but by God, by destiny itself. In this silence, there is no applause for endurance, no recognition of effort. It is the stripping away of all external validations, until only the raw self remains, naked and trembling before existence. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." This truth reverberates painfully in the hearts of those enduring spiritual isolation. The chosen soul often finds that the more they ascend inwardly, the more disconnected they become from the rhythms of ordinary life. Friends misinterpret them, society misunderstands them, and even family may look upon them as strangers. This alienation is not a punishment, but a furnace. It burns away false identities, forcing the individual to confront their essence without disguise. Yet isolation is more than emotional exile. It is psychological warfare. The mind, deprived of mirrors in which to see itself, begins to fracture. Questions like, am I deluded? Or has my suffering any meaning? Circle endlessly, like vultures over a body not yet dead. This torment is the exact threshold where many falter. Some collapse into despair, clinging to illusions for comfort. But the chosen soul, if they dare to stay, discovers a harrowing truth. Endurance itself becomes a form of vision. When all else is stripped away, the chosen one begins to see with eyes not of flesh but of spirit. Consider the paradox again. What feels like abandonment is, in reality, a preparation. The absence of human affirmation creates the capacity for divine affirmation. The silence becomes a language of its own, teaching lessons that no teacher could articulate. Only in this void can a soul hear the whispers of the eternal. And so, the desert, once a place of torment, becomes the sacred ground of transformation. But this is only the beginning. Isolation, as brutal as it may be, is the first of many gates. Beyond it lies a darker and more perilous test. One where even the self, painstakingly uncovered in silence, is threatened with dissolution. If isolation tears away the voices of others, the next trial targets the deepest stronghold of identity itself. If the desert of isolation strips away the voices of others, the next spiritual trial goes deeper. It dismantles the very structure of the self. Imagine standing before a mirror that suddenly splinters into 1,000 shards. Each piece reflects not the image you thought you knew, but fragments you barely recognize. Shadows of forgotten desires, suppressed fears, and versions of yourself you had long buried. This is not madness, though it feels like it. It is the trial of self-fracturing, where the chosen soul is forced to confront the terrifying reality that identity itself is not as solid as we believe. Most people move through life with a coherent story of who they are, their values, their roles, their ambitions. But for souls marked for deeper initiation, this narrative is violently disrupted. The illusions of certainty, I am this, I believe this, I belong here, collapse under the weight of an unrelenting question. What if everything I think I am is a lie? This test is harrowing because it attacks the most intimate foundation of human existence, the sense of continuity. Without a stable self, how can one love, choose, or even hope? The chosen soul feels as though they are dissolving, piece by piece, into chaos. Memories are questioned, beliefs seem fraudulent, desires feel alien. In this void, many experience a kind of spiritual vertigo, a dizziness so profound it can drive one to despair. Yet hidden within this fracturing lies a fierce and paradoxical grace. The self that shatters was never the ultimate truth. It was a scaffolding necessary but temporary. The breaking of identity is not the end, but the unveiling of a deeper essence that has no name, no face, no fixed shape. It is the part of us that precedes our stories, the core untouched by time or culture. Carl Jung described something similar when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This trial drags the unconscious into daylight. It forces the chosen to see every hidden motive, every concealed wound, every shadow of themselves they had disowned. It is as though life itself conspires to hold up a cracked mirror, saying, "Look, you cannot pass through without seeing who you really are." The process is not gentle. It can feel like betrayal by one's own mind. Doubt becomes a constant companion. The chosen soul may feel unworthy, hypocritical, even monstrous. But beneath these fears lies the very key to liberation. For when the false self collapses, there is no longer anything to defend. No masks to polish, no reputations to protect. In that nakedness, a freedom dawns, a freedom not of ego, but of essence. The challenge, of course, is survival. Not every soul withstands the storm of self-fracture. Some cling desperately to the remnants of their old identity, pretending the shattering never happened. Others retreat into despair, unable to bear the weight of uncertainty. But those who dare to remain in the fragments discover something extraordinary. The light that seeps through the cracks is not foreign. It is the radiance of their true being, long hidden beneath the fragile glass of the constructed self. The chosen endure this test because they are being prepared for something greater. To serve truth, one cannot be imprisoned by illusion. To carry light, one must first pass through shadow. The shattered self, though painful, is a sacred death that precedes rebirth. And yet, rebirth does not come immediately. After isolation and the fracturing of identity, the chosen soul is ushered into an even more perilous arena, not of the self, nor of society, but of existence itself. If the first trials strip away what is humanly bearable, the next one confronts the soul with the most terrifying silence of all, the silence of meaninglessness. There comes a point where even endurance feels hollow. Isolation may strip away the voices of others, and the shattered self may dismantle illusions of identity. But beyond these lies a deeper and more paralyzing chasm, the trial of meaninglessness. This is the stage where the chosen soul stares into the abyss and asks, with desperate honesty, why does any of this matter at all? For most people, meaning is stitched together by culture, religion, relationships, and ambitions. These structures, though fragile, give life a sense of coherence. But the chosen soul, having already endured isolation and the fracturing of identity, can no longer lean on these scaffolds. The desert has stripped them bare, the mirror has shattered, and what remains is the terrifying possibility that existence itself may be indifferent, perhaps even absurd. The weight of this test is suffocating. To wake each morning under the suspicion that nothing matters, that love, sacrifice, suffering, even transcendence itself may be without purpose, is to feel the ground vanish beneath one's feet. The chosen soul finds themselves drifting in an existential void where no compass works, no answers satisfy. Albert Camus captured this despair when he wrote, "The literal meaning of life is whatever you're doing that prevents you from killing yourself." His words pierce with raw honesty. The confrontation with meaninglessness is not abstract philosophy, but a question of survival. It is here, more than anywhere else, that the chosen soul faces the temptation to abandon the path altogether. Why endure suffering if it leads nowhere? Why sacrifice if the universe is deaf to human cries? This trial is unlike the others because it is not about loss, but about emptiness. In isolation, something was taken, companionship. In the shattered self, something was broken, identity. But in the abyss of meaninglessness, there is not even something to lose. There is only nothingness, staring back with merciless indifference. The temptation in this abyss is to grasp desperately for artificial meaning, to cling to dogmas, to invent illusions, to numb the void with distractions. Yet the chosen cannot rest in falsehood. Their soul is wired for truth, even if truth comes cloaked in despair. And so, they remain suspended over the abyss, refusing shallow consolations, enduring the vertigo of emptiness until something deeper emerges. For some, this endurance is unbearable. The abyss swallows them, and they live the rest of their lives as hollow shells, functioning but never truly alive. But for those who persist, those who let the nothingness burn through every pretense, a strange and luminous shift occurs. The abyss, once a threat, becomes a doorway. The realization dawns that meaning is not given from without. It must be forged from within. The chosen soul begins to sense that life's value does not depend on some grand cosmic justification. Instead, meaning arises in the very act of living, choosing, and loving, even in defiance of the void. To look into the abyss and still choose to create, to still choose to love, to still choose to endure, this becomes the most radical affirmation of existence. This transformation is not an escape from meaninglessness, but a transmutation of it. The abyss remains, but it no longer paralyzes. It becomes the backdrop against which the chosen soul paints their truth. Suffering is no longer endured in vain. It is transformed into depth. Love is no longer sentimental. It is courageous rebellion against the void. Yet even this triumph does not mark the end. Having passed through isolation, the shattered self, and the abyss of meaninglessness, the chosen soul is prepared for a test even more paradoxical. One that is not about emptiness but about weight. For beyond the void, the chosen must confront the crushing responsibility of carrying light in a world that often prefers darkness. If the abyss of meaninglessness threatens the chosen with emptiness, the next trial strikes with its opposite, unbearable weight. Once the soul has survived isolation, shattered identity, and the void of meaninglessness, it emerges into a new and paradoxical test, the trial of responsibility. No longer drifting in nothingness, the chosen is suddenly confronted with the immense burden of carrying light, truth, or healing in a world that often resists it. Responsibility may sound noble, even desirable, but for the chosen it is a relentless pressure that often feels impossible to bear. To awaken to deeper truths is not merely to be enlightened, it is to be conscripted. Knowledge demands action, awareness demands accountability. What once was personal suffering now becomes a call to stand for something larger than oneself. And the chosen soul discovers that to carry light is to walk against the grain of the world. Consider the paradox. The one who was stripped bare, broken, and left suspended over the abyss is now asked to rise, to act, and to bear the weight not only of their own soul, but often of others. The desert forged endurance, the shattered self forged authenticity, the abyss forged courage. But now those qualities are demanded in service of something beyond the self. This is not merely about survival anymore, it is about becoming a vessel. The burden manifests in countless ways. The chosen may feel responsible for truths that others cannot yet face. They may carry empathy so deep it feels like drowning in the pain of the world. They may sense duties toward justice, compassion, or creation that stretch far beyond their human capacity. With each step, the soul feels the crushing question, who am I to bear such weight? The danger here is not despair, but exhaustion. Many chosen souls collapse under this relentless responsibility, consumed by guilt when they fail to live up to the impossible standard they feel placed upon them. The temptation is to retreat, to withdraw into silence, to refuse the call. Yet this too becomes its own form of torment, for once awakened, the soul cannot unknow what it knows. The responsibility does not vanish when ignored. It festers. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once observed, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." This is the essence of the chosen's burden. To awaken to the profound freedom of responsibility is also to awaken to its paralyzing weight. Every choice matters. Every action reverberates. And this awareness can be as terrifying as it is empowering. But hidden within this crushing weight lies a secret. Responsibility, when carried consciously, does not only crush, it also strengthens. Just as muscles are built under resistance, the soul expands under the pressure of responsibility. The chosen learns that they are not meant to carry the entire world. They are meant to carry their part of it. The burden refines discernment. What is truly theirs to hold, and what must be left to others? And here, something remarkable occurs. The chosen discovers that responsibility is not solitary. Just as light cannot be contained in one flame but spreads from torch to torch, the weight of responsibility, when embraced, inspires others to bear their share. What begins as an unbearable load becomes a shared covenant. The chosen soul, once crushed by burden, becomes a catalyst for collective awakening. Yet even this shared burden does not mark the final trial. For the chosen, one test remains, the most paradoxical of all. Having endured isolation, the shattered self, the abyss, and the weight of responsibility, the soul must now face the trial that transcends suffering and duty alike, the trial of surrender. The question is no longer whether they can endure or act, but whether they can relinquish even their striving and dissolve into the mystery from which they came. After surviving isolation, the fracturing of identity, the abyss of meaninglessness, and the crushing burden of responsibility, the chosen soul approaches the most mysterious and paradoxical test of all, surrender. Unlike the earlier trials, which demanded endurance, confrontation, or action, this final crucible asks for something profoundly counterintuitive, the relinquishing of control. Surrender is not weakness. It is not resignation or passivity. Rather, it is the final collapse of the illusion that one's will alone can conquer the spiritual path. For the chosen, this test feels like the death of striving. They have fought through deserts, endured shattering, stared into the void, and carried unbearable burdens. They have proven strength, resilience, and authenticity. And yet, at the threshold of true transformation, all these virtues must be set aside. The soul must release its grip on the very qualities that carried it thus far. This test is terrifying because it feels like annihilation. After surviving so much, how can one now let go? The chosen soul often resists, clinging to the belief that progress depends on more effort, more discipline, more willpower. But the truth whispered by the final trial is devastating. What the soul has sought cannot be seized, only received. To cross this threshold, one must surrender every claim, even the claim of being chosen. This surrender is not only personal but existential. It is the recognition that the individual self, no matter how refined, cannot contain the infinite. The chosen learns that they are not the author of their story, but a participant in a mystery that transcends comprehension. To surrender is to yield to this mystery, not in defeat, but in trust. Lao Tzu hinted at this paradox when he wrote, "By letting go it all gets done. The world is won by those who let it go. But when you try and try, the world is beyond the winning." The chosen soul finally sees that the path is not about conquering, but about dissolving into alignment with what already is. The process of surrender often comes through breaking. After carrying the weight of responsibility, the chosen may reach the point of collapse. They realize their human strength is finite. Their vision, though expansive, is limited. Their heart, though vast, cannot bear the world alone. In that collapse lies the doorway. By admitting their smallness, they open themselves to the vastness that has always been guiding them. And here lies the greatest paradox. Only when the chosen stops clinging to their identity, their mission, even their sense of chosenness, do they finally touch the eternal. What they sought in deserts and mirrors, in abysses and burdens, reveals itself not as a conquest but as a gift. Surrender becomes the passage from being a seeker to becoming an instrument, no longer struggling for light, but allowing light to shine through them. This final trial transforms everything that came before. Isolation becomes solitude filled with presence. The shattered self becomes transparency for the divine. The abyss of meaninglessness becomes the canvas for infinite possibility. The crushing weight of responsibility becomes shared flow, no longer carried but channeled. All these transformations converge in surrender, where the chosen soul realizes the ultimate truth. They were never alone, never abandoned, never merely human in their trials. They were always being carried, even when they thought they were carrying themselves. To endure the hardest spiritual tests is to walk a path few would dare, a path that wounds as much as it heals, that destroys as much as it creates. But those who pass through to the end discover that what seemed like endless trials were not punishments, but initiations. They were not tests of cruelty, but of preparation, preparing the soul to dissolve into the infinite mystery where striving ends and being begins. The chosen soul does not emerge triumphant in the worldly sense. They emerge surrendered, luminous, ordinary yet extraordinary, finally free.